The Rebellers by Jane Roberts. A novel. Read by Martin John. Chapter 10. A flicker of amusement crossed Toby's broad face. He turned toward Sloat with mock difference. Sloat towered above him physically, but in vitality and determination there was no comparison between them. Fitch watched angrily, waiting for a chance to make a move. Gunny had him covered, and Toby was waving his gun tantalizingly in front of Sloat. Fitch scowled. If he jumped one of the men, would Sloat take care of the other one? One thing gave him hope. He didn't actually know Sloat too well. Toby expended himself, showed all his cards, while Sloat's reserve at least hinted at latent strength. If only he could get Sloat mad enough to use it. "I knew if I left you two alone a while, I'd find out what the score was," Toby said. "Fitch and I have the guts to come to some kind of decision, Sloat, even if the decisions put us on different sides of the fence. But you're a perfect example of official ineptitude. The funny part is, you're the best they have to offer. This is ruled by reason." "A gun?" Fitch said. "I told you that sometimes I have to use methods I dislike." "You're enjoying yourself, if you ask me." "More than you are, that's for sure," Gunny said, with a laugh. He paced up and down, smirking, all energy and aggressiveness. "Men like Gunny don't use reason," Fitch said. "No, but they act. They aren't scared to make a move," Toby snapped. "And don't try anything, Fitch. I'd hate to shoot, but I would if it were necessary. You're just looking for a chance to jump me. I know that. But do you think that Sloat would back you up? Look at him. Go ahead. Take a good look." Sloat stared back at them, dignified and impassive. The insult didn't seem to mar his deliberateness at all. But Fitch knew suddenly that if he was going to move, he'd have to do it alone. Sloat was too damned conscientious and too slow. If he waited for him, he might wait till hell froze over. Quickly, Fitch lunged for Toby. He caught him by surprise and knocked the gun from his hand. But he'd forgotten how quickly Gunny could move. With that nervous agility, Gunny dived at him and threw him down. Toby picked the gun up and covered Sloat. Then he said, "You're cocky, I'll say that." "Okay, Gunny, let him up." Gunny had his gun only inches from Fitch's face. For a moment, Fitch thought that Gunny was going to let him have it just for kicks. But Gunny sprang to his feet. "Hell, I could have had you easy," he said with a leer. "All right, Gunny. You know where to take Sloat," Toby said. "Sorry to put you under lock and key, Sloat, but you're pretty important to us, in your official capacity. that is. He made no attempt to hide his disgust for the other man. Then he turned to Fitch with a grin. "I've got an excellent idea for diversion. You can teach me to paint while we wait the plague out." "You expect me to give you painting lessons while people die by the millions? All the rebellers are working on constructive projects to avoid panic and boredom. No one will be allowed in or out of this place, and it's bound to get on people's nerves. So I'm keeping everyone busy. Incidentally, don't get any ideas on your own. I still have this gun, you know." Gunny took Sloat aside. Fitch braced himself, hoping to jump Toby while they were alone. But Gunny turned Sloat over to someone else and returned immediately. From then on, Toby and Gunny were with him constantly. If one left the room, someone else took his place. Fitch watched for another chance to escape. At first he refused to give Toby his painting lessons, but then he gave in, hoping that he could turn Toby's attention away long enough to make a move. Toby threw himself into the lessons. Fitch said, "How the devil can you paint when you know what's going on outside?" "My painting doesn't increase the plague deaths, does it?" Toby said with maddening logic. "I always concentrate on whatever's at hand. You may as well enjoy yourself, too. I won't tell anyone." Despite himself, Fitch grinned. The man was incorrigible. "Where did you get the art supplies?" he said. "Stole them from the gallery," Toby said calmly. Fitch laughed. During the last day, he'd had at least partially won Toby's confidence, though the leader of the rebellers remained alert and suspicious. Fitch discovered a bone of contention between him and Gunny, and he tried to use it to good advantage. Still, he didn't dare be too obvious. But finally a chance arose. It began innocently enough. He and Toby were talking about Sloat while Gunny listened glumly. Toby said, "Sloat, a small group of officials are sympathetic with our goals. If they'd followed their own convictions, they could have done something. They've even got appropriations for scientists to work on some birth control pills. But the experimentation fell through just when they were ready to do some testing. Sloat and his bunch were scared off by the rest of the officials, so they send Sloat here to spy on me, to see what we're doing when they're too damn yellow to follow through on anything on their own." Gunny broke in angrily. "I don't know why we just don't raid the whole area and reinforce our own supplies. Why take a chance on a plan that depends on Sloat anyhow? We don't need the artist to begin with." At first Toby ignored Gunny, to Finch's disappointment. Instead he said, "You should understand, Fitch, even if Gunny doesn't." He put down his paintbrush. One of them always kept Fitch covered, and Toby automatically took the gun to give Gunny a rest. "I have this vision," Toby said. "I see the world sloughing off in filthy layers, and the future pulsating, waiting for new form. Being an artist, you should understand my impatience with the shoddy. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I'm not apologizing for them either." "Why tell me?" "I want you to know that it's easy for Sloat and his little bunch to point a finger at me, but they never did more than to preserve the status quo. And they cry because nothing ever changed." Toby's bright eyes narrowed. "I'll tell you one thing," he said. "I'll ride into that plague-ridden burrow myself and steal those artists from right under the noses of those officials. When the Contrapolis is filled with the dead, I'll burn it down and start anew. Justice is justice. Let the plague do the dirty work." A knock came at the door. One of the rebellers handed Toby a piece of paper. He read it, growing excited. "This is the daily death report. 73 in Ilmarborough alone. It's worse in Binghamton Borough. 203 there. Before too long things will be confused enough so that we can move in. For crying out loud, you're supposed to think so much of the race. Then how can you sit by at a time like this?" Fitch exploded. The death report shook him to the bone. "Do something to help." Gunny's face turned livid. "You stay out of this." "Fitch isn't going to change my mind about anything, Gunny. Calm down," Toby said. "We just happen to see eye to eye about a few things." "Yeah, well, I don't like your seeing eye to eye about anything," Gunny grumbled suspiciously and glowered at Fitch. Fitch's heart was pounding. If he could only drive a wedge between Toby and Gunny. He grinned at Toby and said, "I don't know why you want a pipsqueak like him in the rebellers for anyhow." As he hoped, Gunny made a lunge for him. But he was ready this time. He wrenched the gun from Gunny's hand. Toby sprang toward them, and Fitch pushed Gunny in front of him as a buffer. Gunny swore his head off, but Fitch had his arm around the man's throat, and he dragged the protesting Gunny toward the door. "You let out a yell, and I'll let Gunny have it," he said. Toby stared at him. "You would, too, wouldn't you?" "You're damn right I would." He wrenched the door open, threw Gunny to the floor, and rushed down the hall. He knew that all hell would break out. Gunny appeared at the door. He took a couple of shots at Fitch, but Fitch flattened out against the wall. Then he ducked into a side corridor. A few minutes later, Gunny went rushing past. Footsteps echoed as other rebellers came to Toby's call. Fitch tried to figure out what he should do next. He regretted not taking Gunny hostage, yet he feared that Gunny would be too hard to handle. Quickly he doubled back, looking this time not for his room, but for Toby's study. Who would think of looking for him there? His memory of details stood him in good stead. Frantically he searched the wall for the right indentation that sparked the opening mechanism. He found it almost at once. The wall slid open. He stepped into the small vestibule, and automatically the door slid back down. The first part of his plan was successful, but the next steps were the most important. He had to find Sloat and Mandy. They had to find their way out of the rebellers' headquarters without being caught first. He leaned against the wall to get his breath. Then he touched the portion of rock that opened the next door to Toby's inner office. A voice said, "For crying out loud!" and he spun around with the gun ready. It was a girl. He recognized her at once. It was Janice, the girl who had sheltered him that night of his escape from the gallery. She was startled as he was. "You! What are you doing here?" Then she frowned and said irritably, "Well, are you going to shoot me or help me? I want to get out of here." He said with a grin, "I'm not sure. I guess we'd better get out before Toby's goons find us. For that matter, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I'll tell you later, but I'm not going to do anything to hurt Toby." "Who asked you to? Do you know the way out of this place? I want to get two friends first, though. Sloat and Mandy. Do you know where Toby keeps prisoners?" "Yeah." She puckered her brows. "You have to take me with you. I'll explain later." Steps pounded outside the hall. They halted. Fitch held his breath. Toby's voice said clearly, sharply, "Don't bother trying my office. He wouldn't hide in there." The steps faded. Janice said, "He doesn't want them to find me." "Boy, you were lucky." "Oh, stop leering. It isn't what you think." They waited a moment longer. Janice seemed lost in deliberation. Then she said, "Okay, let's get going. Thank God you have a gun. If I had one, I'd have been out of this place long ago." They went through the vestibule, pausing. "I don't hear anything," she said. Fitch pressed against the wall. The door sprang open. They ran down the hall. Janice motioned to him quickly, and he followed her down a rock stairway. "The prisoners are kept down here," she whispered. "Hurry up." They crept along as quietly as possible. Lights shone at the foot of the stairs from beneath a wooden door. "Shush! There's a guard just beyond the jog in the wall. You'll have to jump him. But don't make any noise because there's another stationed just inside," she said. She watched him anxiously, and her eyes were so worried and big that he grinned. Then he sprang forward. The guard yelled out once before Fitch could gag him. He gave him an undercut, then another, and the guard slumped to the floor. The door was thrown open from the other side, but Fitch was waiting. He caught the guard by surprise, grabbed him around the neck, and threw him down. Janice took his keys even while Fitch wrestled with him. For a moment the fight hung in balance. Fitch didn't want to use his gun unless he had to. But as the guard struggled to his feet, Fitch hit him on the back of his neck with the gun, and he and Janice rushed into the next room. There were 7 cells, but all were empty except 2. In those, Sloat and Mandy rattled the bars. "I don't know if I should let you out or not," Fitch said. "This isn't any time for jokes," Janice said. "Hurry up, will you?" "She's a friend of Toby's," Sloat said quickly. "Without her, I wouldn't be this far," Fitch said. "Janice, how do we get out of here now?" She started to answer, then gasped. I just felt a rush of cold air against my legs. Someone opened the door at the head of the stairs. They must have checked Toby's office and discovered that I was gone. "Follow me. They'll be on our tail in a minute." Fitch opened the cells. They all ran through the room and out a door at the end, with Janice in the lead. The corridor outside was damp and slippery with dirt floors. They ran as quickly and quietly as they could, while the sound of their pursuers came closer. "We'll never make it," Janice said. "Wait." Before Fitch could stop her, she rushed past him, back through the corridor to the door, and locked it. "I don't know if this will help or not. They'll have to go back and get the other set of keys," she said. "If not, we've lost a few precious minutes," Sloat said. But Fitch nodded. It was worth a chance. The passageway had turned into a tunnel. Rocks hung dangerously loose from the walls. From behind them came angry shouts. The rebellers had discovered the locked door. "I hope to hell they don't have extra keys on them," Mandy said. Suddenly the tunnel took an upward turn. Cold air blew in from open crevices. "Now watch it," Sloat said. "There's bound to be guards along here someplace." The words were no sooner out of his mouth than the rocky walls disappeared and the tunnel reached the outside. It was dark. They stood on a mountain ledge, looking directly at 3 guards who squatted there. For a second no one moved. Then all hell broke out. They were evenly matched, but the guards had been waiting for them, and Fitch's group were already tired from running. The guards rushed them. Janice tripped one of them. Sloat knocked down the man against the rocks. Janice yelled, "They're coming from the other end. They've got the door open." The ledge was narrow and slippery. Fitch knocked one of the guards out. Mandy got another one. Sloat was still fighting with the third, and Fitch and Mandy rushed to his assistance. All by herself, Janice was giving the 4th man a run for his money, but Fitch had to come to help her. Shouts rose from the tunnel. Janice started running down the ledge. One of the guards already struggled to his feet. "We've got to make it to the trucks," Sloat yelled. Fitch and Mandy followed him. Just then, Toby's men emerged from the tunnel. Shots rang out. Janice and Sloat clambered down the final ledge, with Fitch and Mandy behind them. "Why aren't they following us now?" Sloat said, and Fitch realized that the pursuers had halted. He hurried even faster to take advantage of the lull. "I don't like it. Why the devil did they stop?" Sloat muttered, and Fitch looked back. The rebellers were arguing among themselves. The word plague rang out. Fear was the wall that held them back. They were afraid to go too far outside. But then Toby yelled, "Go after them, you idiots!" A few of the braver men rushed forward. Then they all followed. As if to make up for their hesitation, they seemed to have extra strength and agility. The whole band spilled down the ledges. Suddenly lights splashed on. The trucks were only a few feet away, but now the veil of darkness was gone. "Hurry, or we won't make it," Fitch yelled. Now he and Sloat were in the lead. Shots rang out. They made a dash for it and ran with all their might toward the trucks. In Chapter 10. Peace, light, and love. Aloha.